My name is Casey Cavanagh. I'm a clinical psychologist and the co-director of the Behavioral Medicine Consultation Liaison Service with my colleague, Joey Yost.
Hey, I'm Joey Yost. I'm also a clinical psychologist. I also co-direct the Behavioral Medicine Consultation Liaison Service and direct our Behavioral Emergency Response Team program as well.
And we'll be presenting to you today on kind of part 2 about supporting residents and other trainees during COVID-19. So last time we spoke with you kind of really specifically about just general recommendations that can be very useful for clinicians during this time. Today we'd like to speak with you about some more specific recommendations, tools and techniques that we think can be really helpful. One of the first things that I think we've really found throughout the COVID-19 pandemic that has been really useful is the importance of kind of listening to our colleagues and to other staff members. So there's actually been a lot of work on this already, even though the COVID pandemic has only been going on for a short period of time. So one study actually came out in 2020. This looked at a small sample of healthcare providers and basically asked them what are the things that they feel like they need in terms of support from their organizations. And the real clear message throughout all of these different themes in terms of hear me, protect me, prepare me, support me, and care for me is the importance of listening to our colleagues and to our staff members. So that's one of the things that Dr. Yost and I have been really working on in terms of trying to provide that support to our team members, particularly those on our SPU units, but also to other team members who we know are needing this additional support. So that's one area that can be really important that we can offer to our colleagues and to our peers, is to really be able to provide that support of listening to their concerns. More specifically though, we have a couple of strategies that we thought could be helpful to discuss with you as residents and other trainees. We know that these are very useful for basically anybody. They might seem a little bit straightforward, but it's helpful to kind of review. So we do know that oftentimes when we're facing really stressful situations, it's very easy for us to kind of get stuck in thoughts, particularly anxious thoughts that might be occurring. It's kind of our brain's automatic survival mechanism. And so it makes sense in a lot of ways, but unfortunately that can kind of get us stuck and really prevent us from kind of moving forward towards whatever we want to accomplish. So we really want to try and work on not getting carried away by this. So some of the things that we're going to talk with you today about are kind of challenging our thoughts as well as distraction techniques that can be really useful for these cases. So the first thing I'll be talking with you about today are how to challenge some unhelpful thoughts. So there's a couple of different models that can be really helpful and useful. Some have catchier acronyms like the FEAR model, but there's also the very simple approach, which is just called the ABCDE technique. So basically, this is the idea that when we have a situation that is stressful or anxiety provoking, it can oftentimes cause us to feel anxious or stressed or frustrated or irritated or a whole bunch of other kind of unhelpful emotions. And what we know is that it's not so much the situation that is really causing that, it's how we think about that situation. And so it can be really helpful to kind of pay attention to those unhelpful or maladaptive thoughts so that we can try and see if they're accurate, if they're helpful, and if they're not, what are ways that we can kind of challenge them. And so these are a couple of techniques that explore that. So the A part, or the F part for the FEAR model, is basically just when you're feeling distressed, kind of really paying attention to those thoughts that are going on. What is your mind telling you? Can you identify specifically discomfort or fear that might be related to the COVID-19 pandemic? Or is it related to maybe some other stressor that you're encountering currently? The B part of the model, or the E part, if you're using the FEAR model, is just kind of believe or expecting. And this is really critical. Don't automatically believe our thoughts, particularly when we're in a stressful situation. We're a little bit more likely to believe some of those anxious thoughts. Unfortunately, that's not going to really help us in the long run. So we want to try and identify any type of unhealthy thoughts, and we want to really be paying attention to those things that could be trying to predict the future or making us think that things are much more likely to occur. The C part of the model is kind of challenging, or the A part of the model for the FEAR model is looking at alternative ideas and steps. So this is really trying to basically look at the bigger picture. We can ask ourselves, is this fact or opinion? What might we think if we were a little bit calmer? And can we try to generate some of those alternative ideas that maybe are a little bit more realistic? The D part of the model is really just trying to acknowledge the fact that there is a lot of anxiety that's going on. It's kind of probably dominating our thoughts, and we need to try and help let go of those unhelpful thoughts as much as possible by not focusing on so much of those anxious thoughts. So we want to try and not discount some of those positive things that might be occurring. The E part of the model, explore options, and the R part of the model for fear is basically what would be more helpful to focus on right now? What are other options that I have available to me? And if you're looking at the R part, so results and self-rewards, we can look at kind of healthy behaviors and trying to engage in things that are going to reinforce our adaptive coping in these situations. So this is one model, two models really, that could be very helpful in this situation. And Dr. Yost is also going to talk about another model as well that might be helpful for challenging unhelpful thoughts.
Yeah, so different people like different models and different techniques, and so that's why Dr. Cavanagh and I wanted to present you guys with a couple different ones today. The think technique is another way that can be really helpful in challenging some of these unhelpful thoughts. So the first thing that you can ask yourself is my thought true? So not only is it true, but is it 100% true? Oftentimes we believe the thoughts that we have as to be 100% true or fact, and that's not always the case. And so it's really important to identify, what's my thought? Is it true? Is it 100% true? And if it's not, what are the facts? And again, what are the opinions, as Dr. Cavanagh talked about in the previous model? The next part is my thought helpful? So is paying attention to this thought useful to me or to other people, or is it not? If it's helpful, then it should inspire me to do something, to make a change or take an action. If it's not helpful, there's really nothing for me to do about it. And so then paying attention to that thought may not be something that I want to choose to do. Is the thought inspiring? So does the thought inspire me, or does it have the opposite effect of making me feel really down and unmotivated and unable to do anything? Is the thought necessary? So is it really important for me to focus on this thought? If it's important for me to focus on it, is it necessary for me to act on it? If not, again, it may not be worth paying attention to at this point. And lastly, is the thought kind? If it's not kind, what might be a kinder thought for me to have? So these are some ways that we can help challenge, again, some unhelpful thoughts. Now, what happens if you try to do this and you still find yourself staying stuck in thoughts that aren't helpful, that aren't true, they're not inspiring, necessary, or kind? Well, at that point, distraction techniques come into play. And we're going to talk about that in 1 minute. But the last part about challenging unhelpful thoughts is identifying what are some specific unhelpful self-talk that's happening among clinicians right now. How do we address it? So here are some examples, both from the literature and that we've heard working here, that are really important to catch and try to challenge. So the thought or the assumption that it would be selfish to take time to rest or to take time off right now, that other people are working around the clock, and so that means I should as well, that the needs of survivors are more important than the needs of helpers, that I can contribute the most by working all the time, and that only I can do my job, the piece of this that I have to contribute. I think when you see these in black and white, you can identify those are probably not helpful thoughts for me personally to have, right? Because they're going to lead me likely to burn out and to work more than I should be and to not give myself adequate rest, like we talked about last week. And so these are some specific thoughts that clinicians are having right now that are really important to use the techniques we've talked about to challenge and change. But like I said, what happens if we get stuck in these thoughts and can't get ourselves out? Distraction techniques. So distraction techniques are really helpful to do exactly what they are titled to do, which is to distract us from unhelpful thoughts. This is a list, I think the total list, there's another page of these. We're not going to read all of these out loud to you, but here is an extensive list of ways that you can distract yourself from watching a comedy, doing a 7 days of happiness challenge, playing a trivia or game, doing some mindful coloring, exercising, starting a blog, updating your CV. That's probably not the first thing I would turn to if I were trying to distract myself, but some people might. Oh yeah, 74 total. So this is pretty expensive. Using the Netflix party extension to watch Netflix with friends, doing some gardening, etc. So we wanted to make sure you guys had this resource so that you could browse through these distraction techniques. It's by all means not exhaustive, but might give you some ideas about ways to, if you get stuck in unhelpful thinking and kind of just need to put it down for a minute, doing 15 to 20 minutes of something to distract yourself could be really helpful. I think that's most of what we had for today. So again, a reminder that our UVA sources of information are the health system website, the COVID-19 resources website, the COVID-19 dashboard, and as always, the Faculty Employment Assistant Program website, which will direct you to any mental health needs that you might have. So that's what we have for you guys today. Please feel free to send in questions or comments if there are additional things you'd like for us to talk about. But thanks as always for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.